We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday. We're in the midst of the week. Plenty of shit happening. We'll be talking about a lot of stuff. Yes, I still have the cold, but I do feel a lot better. And in fact, instead of drinking water today, I'm going to drink tea with honey. I get the feeling that when I drink something cold, it agitates my vocal cords. I don't know. Probably wrong about that, but it can't hurt to have tea with honey. Anyhow, pretty jacked up about today. Not because of the news. There's plenty of news, though, that we'll talk about. But later tonight, my wife and I get to go watch our granddaughter for a couple of hours while dad goes to a meeting. That's going to be fun. We're getting her all prepared for Christmas. And this is like the first Christmas where she's really excited and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm excited about Christmas. It's been a long time since my kids were little that Christmas was exciting. It's not so exciting when you're old anymore. It's always about the kids. My kids aren't kids anymore, but my grandkid is a kid. So that's awesome. And we're looking forward to it. We've got some emails that we'll get to. And one of the reasons I brought up my cold is because of this email from Garage Door Jeff. He says, "Hi, Boomer. Thank you, Dan, for a good conversation and show. That was a great start to a Monday morning." Yes, thank you, Dan, for being on the show yesterday. I appreciate it immensely. He goes on to say, "Boomer, listen, on an index called Just How Grizzled Is This Old White Motherfucker? I'm going to score north of you and just south of Chicago 7 Ed." Okay, so you're somewhere between 63 and 73. Then this is what he says, "But this is too long for a common cold. If you haven't gone to a clinic or your doc, maybe you should. We need you at 100% for the long haul. Best, Garage Door Jeff." You know what's interesting? It is too long, but the thing is that everybody I know that has this cold has had it for a long time too. It's much better, really. It's just that my throat gets scratchy and it's a little difficult when I do this. When I talk a lot, I tend to cough. Now I can get through a 2 minute or 3 minute TikTok with no problem. But when you sit down and talk for an hour, it's a little more difficult. I understand what you're saying. I talked to somebody, maybe on TikTok, and they suggested that I go to the doctor and get some prednisone for a week or so, and that will knock it out. Maybe I'll do that. I'm not one of these people that says, no, I'm not going to the doctor. If I'm sick or hurt, I go to the fucking doctor. And I got to go to the doctor anyway for my normal checkup. So I may very well do that. Because trust me, I'm tired of this bullshit too. It's uh it's not fun trying to sit down and do this and talk when you've got a scratchy throat and a propensity of coughing now and again. Although I found another little trick that I can do, and I don't know how it shows up on the podcast, the video part of the podcast, but I record this on Zoom so I can go in and pause the recording, cough my head off, and then come back on. So that's helpful. It is getting better, though. Don't worry about me. I'm not afraid to go to the doctor. Anyway, the next one says, thanks, Jeff. Dear Boomer, I've been watching the streaming of the boos Trump got when he went to the recent game, the football game. There were people lining the tiers of the building, booing as loud as they could. I mentioned before in comments how his rallies have been getting smaller and smaller, and still he can't fill the seats, no matter what he says about them. How long before he stops altogether? Fingers crossed. Well, he's having a problem doing the rallies anyway, because there's a certain amount of expense to having those rallies. And the fact of the matter is that nobody's extending him credit anymore. He owes everybody money. He hasn't paid any of the cities that he went to, and he's finding himself in a tough situation. I think he's having less rallies now I expect that probably will continue. You have to understand, we're watching the demise of Donald Trump. Everything that he could do 4 years ago, he can't do now because um, he's losing support. And this is why I say, when it comes to 2024, how can anybody possibly suggest that Donald Trump will win in 2024? His support is far less than it was in 2020. People are scared to death about the prospect of Donald Trump coming in. This is why I say it's going to be a blue wave in 2024, especially in the presidential race. There's nobody that's going to beat Biden at this point. Now, he goes on to say, I've also noticed more and more Republicans have been speaking out about him, and they do get on Fox. So I'm thinking not only in his mind slipping noticeably, but his hold over the party is beginning to slip almost as quickly. Yeah, I would say his grip on the Republicans. I mean, when you win one race in 2016 and you lose every other race henceforth, people are going to start saying, maybe he's not. There's not an advantage to having Donald Trump on your side. Fucking Republicans are slow, though. I swear to God, they're not really going to walk away until after they get their ass pounded on 2024's election day. But they're starting to feel it. They're starting to see it now. Personally, I think he's going the same way as his father with his constant mixing Biden and Obama. And I don't think he genuinely thinks Obama is pulling the strings at all. I think that is an excuse for his slips of memory to the Obama days. That's how it starts. It's the most recent memories that go first. I'm keeping an eye out for him twilighting at the moment to see if I'm right. Yeah, that's something that is a little troubling. Now, back to my point, the email says, Trump has been noticeably booed in 2 sporting events and a court appearance now. His staff try to arrange groups to cheer him and shepherd the press to minimize the damage, but I don't think they're doing too good a job. And Republicans, when they see the tide changing, they act like sharks with blood in the water. So you may be right. He might not make it to the Republican nomination. Personally, I would like to see him run because the sane people will get more votes, and by sane, I mean the Democrats. I have to say, I am thoroughly pissed off with them stopping the gag order while that psycho appeals, and that it won't be decided till the 30th. And some of the questions about, can't these people implement safeguards on their social media crap? Oh, yes, they suggested those being harassed should limit their freedom of speech rather than Trump. I listened to the whole thing online and was thoroughly disgusted. When are these judges going to see the danger of this man? When some poor witness or DA gets murdered or attacked like Nancy Pelosi's octogenarian husband, the man should be locked up. He's rabid. We can only hope that happens before one of his insane followers does anything bad. Now, granted, they went to the appeals court, and it didn't go well for Donald Trump in the appeal to the panel of judges. They are going to come out with something on the 30th. Don't get too worried. It's the 28th, so hopefully we'll know then. And I think it goes without saying that they are going to re-engage that gag order. I mean, with his behavior and all that he's been doing, there's no question they're going to re-up the gag order. But the real point of it is how are they going to enforce it, and how are they going to hold him accountable? Because, I mean, we've had gag orders and he's gotten some minimal fines, but that's not enough to stop him. So when are they going to actually do something? That's the question. And I think we're getting to that point where something has to be done. It's getting a little dangerous because I'm hearing about this law clerk that he keeps ranting about. I understand this woman gets 30 to 50 calls a day, death threats and all kinds of bullshit. This woman is not guilty of anything. He's just trying to create some noise and some chaos. And this woman is the victim in this whole thing. There has to come a time when our judicial system protects the people and not the fucking criminals. In this case, that's what they're doing. Emailer goes on to say, I'd also like to know when those stupid lawyers of his will stop letting him dictate their appeals. Some of them are laughable. They cite no law and just rave about witch hunts and misconduct and Biden. When are they going to stop sending these ridiculous appeals up the chain and wasting time and money? You would think that they would have a standard you'd have to meet before an appeal can be heard. Anyway, time is marching on and the fraud case is nearly finished, should be decided before Christmas, and January marks the rape and defamation case. And before we know it, will be March and the election interference case. Can't see true Republicans ignoring all that, can you? I can see some of them ignoring it, but I think more and more people are starting to recognize it. And, you know, when we're talking about Trump-lefucks, we can't really worry about changing their minds. That's not going to happen. We can only change the moderates, the conservatives, the independents. And if we get enough of those people to do it, then it's not really an issue when it comes to the election. There's no way we're going to change the minds of Trump-lefucks. They're going to do what they're going to do. And even if they know better, they're going to lie about it. Emailer goes on to say, anyway, I hope your cough gets better soon. Time makes us all susceptible to the dreaded cold. Looking forward to the next podcast. Angela the Brit. Well, Angela, thank you very much. And the cold is getting better. I mean, for a while there, I thought I would lose my voice, but fortunately it's back and I can continue to do what the fuck I do. Angela, thank you very much. And I can appreciate what you're saying. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous what we're watching going on, but things are coming to a head. And we are going to see some devastating things that Donald Trump is going to have to deal with. And I can tell you this right now, he won't survive all of it. All right, next one comes from Darren. He says, hey, Boomer, just had a laugh when the great border wall was blown down by winds today. Baha, probably should have did that different. He's laughing. Everything Trump has a hand in turns to shit. He's like a reverse Midas touch. Can't wait to hear your take, Darren. Yeah, I brought this up to the Trump-lefuck I had on the show, you know, was going to build a wall. Mexico was going to pay for it. Shit's falling down. And he explained to me, no, that's the strongest wall ever built. Nobody gets over it. I said, well, that's fine. But then why do we have a border problem if you built this huge wall and it's so impenetrable? And he had trouble answering that because he's playing both sides of the fence there. You know, it's funny. I heard from him yesterday. He's still talking about me coming on the live, but this is what he said to me, and I don't know that it's true. I'd be surprised if it's true, but he said that some of my followers came after him, you know, and even got his account banned. He had an account banned before, and now he had to go to another account, and he's doing this shit and that shit, and he's trying to blame. He said, I'm not blaming you, but I'm blaming your followers. I said, look, man, here's what you have to understand. I have almost 300,000 followers. I don't control anything they do. I don't tell them to do anything. I don't try to stop them because that's not my job. I said, the problem here isn't my followers. The problem here is when you go on TikTok, whether it be a live or a video, and you rant the absolute bullshit you rant, with no basis in fact, you're going to rile some people. You maybe haven't experienced it as much up to this point because you have 7,000 followers. But as you get bigger and more people pay attention to you, you're going to get some pushback, especially when you're flat out fucking lying. I said, now with my podcast and with my TikToks, you were exposed to more people. So people of a reasonable mind see what you're saying and they get a little head up about it. And I can't blame them for that. I would say this: don't go after the guy. He's a waste of time anyway. He asked me, I did a video or I was on the podcast and I said, I'll do the um, debate or I'll do the live and I'll fucking bury him. And he came at me and he said, what do you mean by that? Thinking I'm going to get my followers to go after him. I said, I meant that I would talk to you in the live or in the debate on the podcast and bury you because you just talk bullshit and no facts. And, but I don't care if you're blocked or he said, maybe we should just block each other. I said, I don't fucking care. I would block somebody like you anyway. So you motherfuckers made him a little nervous. He's a little upset, and that's good. You don't get to just go out here and say anything and drum up all this bullshit and not expect to get some accountability, much like Donald Trump. This guy goes on his videos, on his live. He just spews rhetoric. There is no facts. There is no information. He's talking conspiracy theories. He's talking QAnon. And he's upset that he's getting pushback. Well, motherfucker, live by the sword, die by the sword. All right, the next email. Hello, Mike, OTR, over the road. Russell here, coming to you from the road tonight. It's Weatherford, Texas. Just a thought on Donnie Dipshit apparently suggesting that the Iowa caucuses are being rigged against him. For months and even years before the 2020 election, the dipshit told all who would listen, and many who didn't listen, that it was likely that the election would be rigged against him. And he did that because he knew he was going to lose. He knows he's probably going to lose in Iowa. As our Iowa friend Erica said, and as we've seen, Donald Trump has gone after COVID Kim, the governor there. Now, she happens to be popular, and that's not something you do. If you're in a lawsuit and the judge is going to make the final decision on your fate, don't piss him off. And if you're going to the Iowa caucus, don't piss off a popular governor. So he knows he's got a shot at losing this. So now he needs to create some controversy or some explanation for his loss. The absolute worst thing that can happen to Donald Trump is that he loses. And when he does lose, it's got to be a fake. It's got to be rigged. That's always going to be the way it is for Donald Trump. And that's what's going to happen in Iowa. He's still ahead in Iowa, but I think he's got some problems there, especially since COVID Kim, the governor, endorsed Ron DeSantis, which is fucking pointless because Ron DeSantis doesn't have a chance. Now, over the road, Russell's continued by saying, yet he was so weak and inept that he couldn't stop it, even with the full power of the executive branch behind him. He now appears to claim that Iowa is being rigged and he's unable to stop it. It seems to me that if he's so bad at keeping others from rigging elections against him, maybe politics aren't for him. It wouldn't hurt my feelings any if he just dropped out and went quietly away. Anyway, keep up the good work and nice job disposing of the Trumper idiot in the debate, OTR Russell. You know, it's funny. That guy, when he's emailed me, he says, you said you were going to bury me, that you were going to beat me. I go, I did say that, and I did do that. And he is in denial about it. You didn't win. I thought it was a good, fuck you. You made no points. There were no facts. There was nothing. And he just doesn't grasp it. They refuse to believe that they have lost anything at all. And over the road, Russell, thank you very much for the email. I appreciate it immensely. I really like the emails. It's a nice way for you to get your say on the show, and we can go through a lot of people quickly on the show. The more people that have input, the more people that give their perspectives, I think the better for the show. So I'll remind folks, if you want to send an email in, or if you just want to talk about being on the show, all you have to do is send an email to rationalboomer@gmail.com. It's as simple as that. And I read all the emails. Doesn't matter who, what, where. If you send me an email, I'm going to read it on the show and I'm going to respond to it. If you want to be on the show, I let everybody on the show. And so for those of you that listen every day, and I know you're out there, those of you that listen every day and have yet to send an email in or ask to be on the show, I'm going to challenge you to do that, because the more people participating, the better the show is. So if you've been holding back or nervous about it, don't be. I will make it very easy on you. Ask anybody who's been on the show. Everybody is surprised how easy it ultimately is. And if we want to do what we want to do with the show, we need your input. So rationalboomer@gmail.com. Send me the email. Send me questions, comments, complaints. I don't give a fuck. Do you want to be on the show? Make comments, ask questions or complaints? That's cool too. All right. Donald Trump is dealing with an appeals court today regarding his gag order. Yesterday, actually. Donald Trump urged the New York appeals court to continue to pause the gag order against him in his civil fraud trial, saying that threats to the judge and his law clerk do not justify limiting the former president's constitutional right to defend him. I beg to disagree. You don't get to just do that shit, whether you're on trial or not. Lawyers for the New York Attorney General's office in the court last week urged the appeals court to put the gag order back in place following serious and credible threats that have inundated Judge Arthur Engoron's chambers since the trial began in October. Trump's attorneys wrote in a filing Monday that the former president has never threatened the judge or his principal law clerk, and they can't be held responsible for actions taken by others. Now, some people might say, well, you just said that about the Trump-the-fuck guy. I never told anybody to go after him. I never even inferred that. But Donald Trump knows what he's doing. He's making ridiculous claims about this law clerk, and he knows it's frothing up his dumbass Trump-the-fucks, and he knows what they're going to do. It's this game that Donald Trump plays. I didn't actually ask you to do it, but you know that you're inciting them to do it. That is his intent. That is what he expects, and that is what he's getting. Now, they argue that Trump's First Amendment right to criticize and call out his perception of bias by the judge and his law clerk without retribution is essential to maintaining public confidence in the trial. How about coming up with some evidence that shows you're not guilty? That might work better. At base, the disturbing behavior engaged by anonymous third-party actors towards the judge and principal law clerk publicly presiding over an extremely polarizing and high-profile trial merits appropriate security measures, Trump's attorneys wrote. However, it does not justify the wholesale abrogation of petitioners' First Amendment rights in a proceeding of immense stakes to petitioners, which has been compromised by the introduction of partisan bias on the bench. Yeah, the judge is partisan. Partisan against people that are fucking guilty. Monday's filing was the first since hundreds of excuse me. Monday's filing was the first since hundreds of harassing messages against Engoron and a law clerk were made public last week. Engoron's clerk has received 20 to 30 calls per day on her personal cell phone. 30 to 50 messages daily on social media platforms, and 2 personal email addresses, according to the court papers. Now, remember, this woman did absolutely nothing wrong. Donald Trump is just making this shit up. He's targeting her and putting her at risk. Now, earlier this month, a New York appeals court judge temporarily lifted the gag order imposed on Trump and his attorneys that blocked them from making public statements about the judge's staff, specifically the principal law clerk who consults with the bench. Trump and his lawyers have argued that the law clerk is biased against Trump on based on political donations she made to some organizations that support the New York Attorney General who sued Trump. They allege she is co-judging the case based on frequent consultations she has with the judge. Co-judging. That's a stretch. You see, what Donald Trump does, it just makes shit up. He is flailing at this point. He is absolutely desperate. He's in dire straits. So much so that he's got to go after a law clerk and claim she's a co-judge and she's going to have some bearing on what this judge decides, which is not true. Now, at the time, the appeals court judge said he would lift the gag order to allow a fuller panel of judges to weigh in and give the constitutional issues at play. So they made their cases to the panel of judges. And as far as I'm concerned, they are probably going to put the gag order back on. Lawyers for judge submitting filings last week urging the appeals court to put the gag order back on in place since the gag order was lifted on November 16, the number of messages increased, and about half of the harassing messages the clerk received were anti-Semitic. That sounds like Trump LaFox, doesn't it? Trump's attorney said Trump can't be blamed for others' comments. Yeah, you can't be blamed for inciting a riot at the Capitol. I think we'll find out differently when that court case starts. However, none of the contemptible dross reflected in those messages can be attributed to President Trump or his counsel, nor have President Trump or his counsel ever made a statement referencing the principal law clerk's religion. Well, no, you haven't talked about her religion, but you just have to find her name, Google her name, and you can find out very quickly what her religion is. She had the picture with Senator Schumer. This is Donald Trump just throwing stuff out saying this is a bad person and then leaving it to the devices of these Trump-lafucks to come up with whatever hate they want to spew at this woman. This isn't a new activity for Donald Trump. This isn't new for him. He did that on January 6th with inciting the insurrection on the U.S. Capitol. Remember, he said Congress was going to take your country away and we need to fight. Or how about those 2 women down in Georgia, those election workers, mother and daughter, just doing their job? They made all kinds of claims of all kinds of things that they were alleged to have done, and it was all lies. And now these poor women have had their lives upended. They get constant death threats. They're stalked. They are in a very scary situation, and it's all because of Donald Trump. Now, if you think what happened to those election workers is bad, then you have to consider what's going on with this law clerk, because the very same thing is going to happen to this law clerk. And as one of the emailers pointed out, what do we have to wait till someone is injured or someone is killed? And then you judges who have been holding back and not holding them accountable, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have blood on your hands. There is policies and laws against what Donald Trump is doing. And if you don't enforce those laws, you're kind of an accessory after the fact. I hate to say that. I don't mean to be a prick, but Let's be honest. If you don't do your job to protect people, well, then you're kind of responsible. And that's what's going on here. Now, the gag order will probably be put back on the 30th. And that's well and good. It may be more narrow, but the gag orders are only good as far as people are willing to enforce them. As I've said earlier, we've had gag orders in effect, and Donald Trump got a couple of minor fines here and there. Certainly not enough to stop him from doing it. There has to be some accountability. There has to be something that Donald Trump, a price he has to pay that he doesn't want to pay. The goal here isn't to put him in jail. The goal here is to shut him up. So it's got to be something strong enough for him to be too fearful for speaking out the way he does. This has nothing to do with your First Amendment rights. You can say whatever you want, but there are some responsibilities to what you say. And you can be sued or jailed or whatever by saying what you're saying. You can say it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's legal, because what you're saying may be intimidating witnesses or court staff, and that is illegal. No matter how you look at it, that is illegal. And Donald Trump is doing it every fucking day. So when they reinstate this gag order, I'm hopefully going to hear something about what they intend to do if he violates again, because doing nothing accomplishes nothing. I mean, if they're going to do nothing, what's the point of even arguing about this gag order? It's ridiculous. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully on the 30th, we'll find out that the gag order is back in effect and that they're actually going to do something to hold him accountable. All right. We are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. All right, we're moving into the second half of the program. And I got to be honest, I think the hot tea and honey is working. It feels a lot better. And of course, the illness is getting better. I still have some issues. It's still kind of hard. I get to points where I'm going to feel like I'm going to cough, and then I do. And I'm doing the best I can. But anyway, we know that yesterday there was more hostages released in the Hamas-Israeli war. And that's good news. And we had a 4-day temporary ceasefire. And now they are going to extend it a day or two to get more hostages out, which is a great thing. I mean, the ultimate goal would be to end this whole fucking thing and get things peaceful again. But as I've said before, as much as the Republicans will come out and they will say Joe Biden is wrong for supporting Israel, the Republicans would have to do that same thing if they were in that same situation. I mean, Donald Trump has told us that nobody's treated Israel better than him. So you think he's going to help the Palestinian people if he were in office? No, of course not. But what you need to understand is when all this information came out about how all the young people were mad at Joe Biden because he was supporting Israel, I told you I didn't think that was true. And when I say that's not true, I'm saying it's messaging coming out of the Republicans. That's not hard to imagine. They say a lot of shit like election fraud or Hunter Biden's laptop. They make up shit and they put it out there in the ether, and some people believe it. Certainly some Republicans, the Trump-la-fucks, but even some Democrats, they buy into the bullshit. But one of the reasons I think that they were so adamant about Joe Biden taking a hit for supporting Israel is because of what's really going to happen here. They know it's going to happen. Joe Biden's done a miraculous job with this particular war. I mean, we are allies of Israel, but he hasn't totally sided with Israel. He's calling for these temporary ceasefires, getting hostages out, getting supplies into citizens in Palestine. And he is really the one that's doing this. Now, some Trump-fucks will say, no, it's Qatar. Qatar's doing it. Well, Qatar and Israel have said none of this would have been done without Joe Biden. And why this troubles the Republicans is this, and why they're trying to get ahead of it by saying that people are mad at him for supporting Israel. Because this will ultimately end probably well before the election. And Joe Biden will be part and parcel to getting this finally worked out. Now, it may be temporary, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, but Joe Biden will be in the middle of it, doing the job that a president should do. And then there will be peace, at least temporarily, and at least peace from our perspective. I know there's a lot of shit going on over there in the Gaza Strip that I don't know anything about. And I'm not going to pretend like I do know about it. But the bottom line is we got to stop the war. And I think Joe Biden is going to be the man to do it. He's been in the business for 50 years. He's got a lot of international diplomacy experience. And it's showing here. At the time we needed somebody to beat Donald Trump, Joe Biden was the right guy at the right time. The time we need to help negotiate some peace in the Middle East, Joe Biden is the right guy. Imagine what would happen if Donald Trump was in office right now. He'd be making threats, bragging, or doing whatever. He would do nothing more than agitate the situation. He wouldn't make it better. But Joe Biden knows what he's doing. And I think the Republicans realize when it's all said and done, he's going to look real good in this situation. And they don't like it. They know it. So they're trying to undercut it early. Now, with what's going on in the Middle East, it's troubling to know that this is kind of filtering over into our country because we have a certain amount of dumb fucks, Trump-fucks, that are racist and hate Muslims and all of this stuff. I was talking about it yesterday. The families of the Palestinian students who were shot Saturday night in Vermont say it's hard to imagine the young men were not targeted. The names of the young men are Hisham Awartani, Kenan Abdul Hamid, and Tashin Ali Ahmed. Now, I'm probably mispronounced them, but you get the point. All of those kids were 20-year-old college students. They were out for a walk during a visit to Burlington when a gunman fired 4 shots at them, according to the police. A suspect, a 48-year-old Jason Eaton, was arrested. Now, I haven't heard about his background, but I'm guaranteeing you, he's a Republican, or better yet, a Trump-fuck, because he doesn't sound like an Israeli that's mad at Hamas and the Palestinians. All 3 men are still hospitalized. Rich Price, Awartani's uncle, said Monday at a press conference his nephew sustained a spinal injury in the attack and faces a long recovery, Price said, while Abdul Hamid is expected to make a full recovery. Ahmad is the most seriously injured of the 3, police said. Now, these 3 young men are incredible, said Price. And that's not just a proud uncle speaking, but it's true. Price, who was hosting the students for Thanksgiving, they have their lives in front of them. They are committed to building incredible lives. Now, what might have tipped this shooter off is they were speaking a mixture of English and Arabic while on a walk around the block when they were struck, police said. 2 of the men were wearing, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, the traditional black and white Palestinian scarf. The attack has shocked the Arab and Muslim communities at a time when Islamophobia and anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian sentiments are on the rise, along with a parallel surge in overt anti-Semitism. Now, last month, a 6-year-old Palestinian American boy was stabbed to death in Illinois, allegedly by a landlord angered over the Israel-Hamas war. Burlington Mayor Muriel Weinberger called Saturday's shooting one of the most shocking and disturbing events in this city's history. City police declined to comment on a possible motive, saying it will focus its investigation on building a case. Sarah George, the county attorney general, said her office does not currently have the evidence to support a hate crime charge, but that there is no question this was a hateful act. Now, this Eaton clown was arraigned Monday and is facing 3 attempted murder charges, each one of them carrying a maximum of a life sentence. Eaton described himself on social media as a radical citizen patrolling democracy, spelled DEMOCKRACY, and capitalism for oath creepers. He's now deleted his page, also featured apparent anti-vaccine and anti-trans sentiment. So who does that sound like? That sounds like Trumplafucks. Now, Eaton pled not guilty to the charges in the shooting, being held without bail. Abdul Hamid's uncle, who flew to Burlington from California on Monday morning, said at the press conference that it's hard to imagine it was a random act. And I think you can be assured that it wasn't a random act. We've got people walking around with hate in their hearts and don't like anybody that's different from them, whether they be of a different color, a different religion, from a different country, from a different sexual orientation. This kind of behavior can be tracked back to Donald Trump. He's all about chaos, he's all about violence, and he's all about attacking people. So as much as Donald Trump doesn't want to take responsibility for the heat that the law clerk for Judge Engoron is getting, he should be held responsible for this shit too. This shit did not happen to this level prior to Donald Trump becoming president. Once he became president, we started seeing more adversarial behavior and more violence. This is the culture that Donald Trump created amongst Republicans, Trumplafucks. He created that. These people don't like something or they lose and they're mad about it. They immediately strike out. They immediately get violent. Donald Trump is responsible for all this shit. He's lucky they're only looking at him for the law clerk, because at least at this point, he's going to be looked at for the insurrection as well when that trial starts in March. Donald Trump, I think in history, we will understand that he was one of the most divisive, most dangerous leaders, whether it be president or senator or congressman, in the history of this country. There has been nobody like him, thankfully, and hopefully there'll be nobody like him in the future. That's why we have to get on track and make sure that Donald Trump and all the other Trumplafucks that support this clown are eradicated from our government. Now, Donald Trump is all about himself. As a narcissist, his biggest concern is, how do people perceive him? He's got to be the coolest, smartest, richest, toughest, fastest, whatever. And if he's not seen as such, it fucks with his head. Now, early Monday morning, Donald Trump addressed reports that his mind is slipping, with a rambling defense claiming his speech blunders are part of a greater strategy. Donald Trump doesn't even know what a fucking strategy is. One of the things you'll see with Donald Trump, as much as they try to say that Joe Biden's losing it, Donald Trump recently was referring to the race in 2016 and how he ran against Barack Obama. When he's talking about the current president, he always suggests Barack Obama. This is like what the emailer sent to us earlier. Clearly, he's losing it. And clearly, he doesn't like the fact that people are suggesting that he's losing it. So he's got to come up with something to strike back with. And of course, he did. Questions have been raised about the former president's seemingly declining mental abilities after recent speeches where he seemed to think he's running for president against Barack Obama and where he was confused world leaders and their respective countries. Now, in an attempt to allay such concerns, Trump took to Truth Social to boast once again that he recently took a cognitive test as part of my physical exam, and I aced it. He aced it. Yeah, well, you're also a pathological liar, so I don't know that I'm buying into that. What he's saying is that when he says these wrong names, he's being sarcastic. Now, as a guy who knows a little bit about being sarcastic, Donald Trump has to understand if nobody else grasps the fact that you're being sarcastic, you're failing miserably. You're just a dumbass. But this is what he said. Whenever I sarcastically insert the name Obama for Biden as an indication that others may actually be having a big influence in running our country, Ron DeSanctimonious and his failing campaign apparatus, together with the Democrats' radical left disinformation machine, go wild saying that Trump doesn't know the name of our president. Crooked. Joe Biden, he must be cognitively impaired, wrote Trump. No, I know both names very well, never mix them up. And I know that they are destroying our country. Also, and as reported, I just took a cognitive test. What are the chances? Cognitive test is part of my physical exam and aced it. Also aced a perfect score, one taking while in the White House. Then he goes on to say, Biden should take one so we can determine why he wants open borders, no energy independence, a woke military high inflation, no voter ID, men playing in women's sports, only electric cars and trucks, a weaponized DOJ, FBI, and so many other crazy things, he added. Now, see, this is what he does. And all this shit is bullshit. Like, for example, the energy independence. I read some facts recently. Back when Donald Trump left office, this country was producing 10.9 million barrels of oil a day. You know what this country is producing now under Joe Biden? 13.2 million barrels a day, which is a record for those numbers prior to COVID. The high number prior to COVID was 13.1 million barrels. So to suggest that Joe Biden has a looser policy on pumping oil, that's clearly not the case. It's just not the case. And when we talk about open borders, there isn't really a lot of difference between what was going on with Donald Trump and what's going on with Joe Biden. Again, this goes back to what I mentioned before. It's all about messaging. It doesn't have to be true. You just spew that stuff out there long enough. And of course, the Trump-fucks will believe it. But even some Democrats believe it, and they get nervous. Oh, I'm nervous about Joe Biden's age. Well, all you have to do is watch what Joe Biden's doing with this Israeli-Hamas war, and you know he's on his shit. Nobody is more experienced or better experienced than Joe Biden to handle this stuff, and he's handling it to a T. And you know as well as I do that if Donald Trump were doing it, it would be fucked up, and a lot of people would die. I told you before, don't listen to the bullshit. Don't listen to the rhetoric, even if it sounds like it's real, or even if you hear it from your particular media outlet. It's bullshit. All right. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson on Monday afternoon said he has spoken to U.S. Representative George Santos suggesting the embattled and indicted New York Republican might resign rather than facing an impending expulsion vote he's likely to lose. Now, that vote's supposed to come today. Will George Santos instead resign? I don't know what's in it for him to do that or what it would hurt him to do that. As I understand it, he went in there to get all the benefits from the House of Representatives, health care, pensions, and all that stuff. You'll be happy to know that he hasn't been in there long enough to get any of that shit. He's going to take his hat and coat and walk out that door and leave with nothing else. Thank God. Now, but over the holiday weekend, Santos suggested he's not going to go out without a fight, as he appeared to take a page out of another embattled Republican's book, former U.S. Representative Madison Cawthorn. You remember what he did. He went out there and he was talking shit about a lot of people, and we know how good it did for him. He was still booted from the House of Representatives, and he hasn't been heard from since. And the only thing we'll hear from George Santos is when he's convicted and sentenced to jail. Now, it's funny about George Santos. He is mad as a motherfucker right now. He's very angry. He called himself the Mary Magdalene of Congress. Wow, Georgie. You're getting kind of flamboyant, kind of drama-filled, aren't you? He's still talking about all the horrible people in Congress. And you know what? I don't question that, with the adultery and the drinking and the parties and coming in drunk and coming in hungover. That doesn't surprise me in the least. These people in the House of Representatives, especially on the Republican side, aren't the classiest folks. It's like white trash in the House of Representatives. What I'm interested in, now Madison Cawthorn didn't have the balls to go over the edge and start naming names, but Georgie's a special kind of guy. He's a fucking lunatic. And I'll tell you this, I've said this before. If you're in an argument with somebody and you beat somebody up or beat them down and they happen to be crazy, that's a dangerous situation because they don't understand ramifications. They're ready to burn every bridge and scorch the earth everywhere, regardless of what the outcome is. And Georgie's one of those guys. He is a bitchy type, if you will. And as Mary Magdalene, I think he's maybe going to head out and maybe he'll name some names, which I think would be awesome. I'd love to see the names that he's going to call out and see how they react to it. But nonetheless, one way or another, Georgie is going to be gone soon, maybe as quickly as today. Now, Punch Bowl News' Jake Sherman reports Speaker Johnson says he has spoke to Congressman Santos at length about his options ahead of the expulsion vote. Johnson seemed like the House may avoid a vote, which would mean resignation. House Republicans allow Santos to be seated despite news that he had manufactured his resume and even his religion. They refused to expel him when he was indicted on 23 federal felony charges, including for alleged wire fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, and lying to Congress. Yeah. They had a couple votes before, and he wasn't expelled. But I think the Republicans have gotten to the point where they've just about had enough, and they realize their majority will be a little thinner. But we're in the last year of this particular term, and let's be honest, fucking Republicans aren't going to accomplish anything anyway. So fuck it, let them go. Now, when we heard about the damning ethics committee report, it provides in great detail overwhelming evidence of alleged misconduct and even more evidence of his alleged criminal acts beyond what even federal prosecutors listed in their indictments. And it has led to a public outcry, forcing some House Republicans to rethink their refusal to expel him. Now, of course, the report alleges Santos used campaign donor cash for shopping trips, Botox, and even the not safe for work site OnlyFans. I'd like to know which accounts he's accessing. That would be interesting. Maybe we'll get that information. Now, over the weekend, Representative Santos spoke on an audio forum hosted at X, formerly Twitter, and indicated not only would he not resign, he appeared to suggest he might take down some Republicans along the way. Of course, in March of 2022, Madison Cawthorn, among the scandals, lashed out on a podcast announcing what he claims was sexual perversion that goes on in Washington, and alleged some of his colleagues he grew up looking up to had used cocaine at orgies. Boy, I don't know if I believe that. Oh, yeah, I fucking believe it. In a similar vein, Representative Santos on Friday in the audio forum said he does not want to continue working with a bunch of hypocrites in Congress. And he accused them of committing infractions more severe than his, including being more worried about getting drunk every night with lobbyists. The Washington Post reported Santos, without providing evidence, also accused his colleagues of trying to sell off the American people and voting while hungover. Within the ranks of the United States Congress, there are felons galore, Santos said, but he also declared, I'm not leaving. Come hell or high water, it's done when I say it's done, though he admitted he would likely be expelled. It's done when you say it's done. What the fuck does that mean? If they kick your ass out the door today, you're leaving. They're going to grab you by the shoulders and toss you out onto the Capitol steps. That's what's going to happen. You want to be the tough guy. You're going to make these threats. I'm curious as to whether or not he will follow through with them. I hope he does. Because, like Muscles and Nursing would say, we need to spill some tea. I don't need to spill some tea. I need to drink some fucking tea. So I can keep my vocal cords wet. All right. MSNBC guest host Ali Velshi spoke with legal experts on Monday to discuss how evidence of threats made against the judge and his staff in Trump's New York civil fraud trial will now be used in Trump's DC trial as the gag order there is being appealed. And that's something you have to consider. Even though what's going on in New York has no direct connection to DC, the behavior can be used and talked about in the appeal in DC. Now, the former president is on trial in federal court in the nation's capital. We know that. Tell me, Belshi asked, tell me about the connection for anyone who doesn't sort of understand the legality of this, of Jack Smith using stuff that's related to the New York civil fraud trial for his own trial. And Andrew Weissman, legal analyst, good guy, knows his shit, responded to that. He says, sure, well, you have two judges, one in criminal case in DC and one in a civil case in New York, dealing with similar issues, which is that Donald Trump is a defendant and he is speaking in ways that the government thinks and the court has agreed, the trial court has agreed, endangers the integrity of the judicial process. That judicial process can be a civil case, as in New York, or a criminal case, as in DC. Now, both of those so-called gag orders are on appeal, and both are stayed pending the appeal, meaning that they are not yet in effect pending the outcome of that appellate process. But the reason they relate to each other is the history of violence, a history of threats to witnesses, potential jurors, to court personnel, to prosecutors. It's all relevant in both cases. I mean, if he does it in one place, it can be considered in the other. Now, Velshi then ran through the hundreds of threatening voicemails and other messages that the judge and his law clerk in New York City have been receiving. Velshi said, the reason I bring this up is because this is not about witness interference. and or court interference in a normal way. It's this permission structure of harassment and intimidation and anti-Semitism. Now, MSNBC's legal analyst Lisa Rubin responded, and you can see that also in the affirmation from the court officer, because in addition to excerpting some of the most vile threats against the principal law clerk, which primarily have to do with her relationship with the judge and her religion, encoded in those are also threats against Letitia James as a New York Attorney General that take on very transparent racist nature. Now, Rubin went on to discuss the nature of the threats, adding, and also threats against the judge who himself is Jewish, and therefore those are anti-Semitic. And there's also a suggestion of homophobia. It's not just a suggestion. There's more than a whiff of it. There's some real homophobia in those threats too. So when you talk about environment of hate, it is sort of a cataclysm of isms, so to speak, in that affirmation. So what Donald Trump has created here is quite a mess, and everything he does in the respective jurisdiction is going to impact the other jurisdiction. And I think we may be coming to the end of the line of Donald Trump not being held accountable. When they put these stays on these gag orders, he didn't lay low and try to behave. He kicked it up a notch and he made it worse. He went hard on this stuff. And don't think the judges don't notice this and consider it when it comes to deciding this. As I said, both these appeals on both these gag orders will not, the gag orders will be upheld. He will be gagged, and he may or may not try to take it to the Supreme Court. Frankly, I'd be surprised if the Supreme Court even accepted it and even was willing to hear it. This is pretty cut and dried. The law here is pretty cut and dried, but we know that Donald Trump will just come out of his ass with anything and say anything to try to either delay, divert, distract, or try to get out of something. But in the last year or so, none of that has worked. The appeals haven't worked for him. His arguments, his complaints, none of it works. We're at a point where the man is flailing and he's sinking and he knows it. So he's going to get even crazier as time goes on. And his complaints and his appeals and those sorts of things will be even more ridiculous. And let's be honest, they are pretty fucking ridiculous at this point. As I've said before, we are watching the demise of Donald Trump. There's no coming back from this. And this is why I don't think he'll be the nominee. Everything's coming down on Donald Trump. He's losing at every turn. And this lawsuit is going to destroy him, not only financially, but emotionally as well. His image is all he's got in his mind, and his image will be destroyed. And then in March, when we have the criminal trial in D.C., there's no way he's winning that case. Just no way he's winning that case. And we know this because his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, has flipped on the motherfucker. There is no more devastating witness against Donald Trump than Mark Meadows, and that's a done deal. He's flipping on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will go down in D.C. Now, what happens in Georgia and in Florida, I don't know. I don't care, because the things I just described will be enough to destroy Donald Trump and take him completely out of the equation. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for spending the time to listen to the podcast today. I hope you have a great day, and of course, we'll talk to you again tomorrow.